Good evening, everyone. In the last 4 videos of this series, we've explored the first 40 chapters of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice The story centers on Elizabeth Bennet, a sharp-witted and independent young woman navigating the complexities of love, marriage, and social class in Regency England. Early chapters introduce the Bennet family and the arrival of Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy, whose contrasting personalities set the stage for misunderstandings and evolving relationships. Elizabeth's initial prejudice against Darcy, fueled by his pride and her own judgments, is a key tension, while Charlotte Lucas's practical marriage to Mr. Collins highlights different attitudes towards social security and companionship. Elizabeth's visit to Charlotte at Hunsford immerses her in the world of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, whose domineering personality and strict social codes underscore the rigid class structures of the time. Mr. Collins's obsequiousness and Lady Catherine's condescension provide both comic moments and social critique. As Darcy arrives at Rosings Park, Elizabeth's perceptions begin to shift. Their interactions reveal deeper layers to Darcy's character and hint at mutual attraction, complicated by misunderstandings and pride. Throughout these chapters, themes of individuality, societal expectation, and the nuances of love are richly developed, setting the foundation for the novel's unfolding drama. In Chapter 41, Elizabeth continues her stay near Rosings Park and reflects more deeply on her interactions with Mr. Darcy. She begins to notice moments that reveal his true character beyond the prideful exterior she initially perceived. His thoughtful and reserved nature contrasts with his earlier haughtiness, leading Elizabeth to question her first impressions. During this time, Elizabeth also receives news from home, including updates about her family and the social happenings in Meryton. These updates remind her of the different worlds she inhabits, the genteel but rigid society of Rosings and the more familiar, lively environment of Longbourn. Lady Catherine de Bourgh remains a dominant figure, exerting her influence and expectations on those around her. Elizabeth's polite but firm resistance to Lady Catherine's judgments further demonstrates her independent spirit and strong sense of self. Mr. Collins continues to fawn over Lady Catherine, his behavior providing a comic contrast to Elizabeth's growing maturity and self-awareness. Chapter 41 deepens the novel's exploration of character development, especially the evolving dynamic between Elizabeth and Darcy. It also highlights the tension between social expectation and personal integrity, setting the stage for the significant events to come. In Chapter 42, the narrative shifts, focus back to Elizabeth and her reflections during her stay at Hunsford. The chapter begins with her growing awareness of her father's flaws, particularly his tendency to withdraw from family responsibilities and mock serious matters, especially in his treatment of his wife and younger daughters. Elizabeth begins to realize that while her father is intelligent and witty, his lack of guidance and seriousness has contributed to the silliness and impropriety seen in some of her sisters, particularly Lydia. This reflection adds emotional depth to Elizabeth's character as she becomes more conscious of the weaknesses within her own family. Soon after, Elizabeth departs from Hunsford with Sir William and Maria Lucas. As they travel, Elizabeth continues to process everything she has experienced during her visit. Her evolving opinion of Darcy, the strange proposal he made, and the hurtful truths revealed in his letter about Wickham and Jane's separation from Bingley. She begins to see how her own pride and prejudices had clouded her judgment. Elizabeth arrives at the Gardiners' home in London, where she prepares for a summer trip with them. The chapter closes with her mind still occupied by thoughts of Mr. Darcy, suggesting that her feelings have begun to shift more significantly. In Chapter 43, Elizabeth travels with her aunt and uncle, the Gardiners, on a summer tour of the English countryside. As part of their journey, they decide to visit Pemberley, Mr. Darcy's grand estate in Derbyshire, under the assumption that Darcy is away. Elizabeth is initially hesitant, fearing it might be improper, but she agrees after learning Darcy is not expected to be home. Upon arriving at Pemberley, Elizabeth is immediately struck by the beauty elegance and natural grace of the estate. The housekeeper gives them a tour, and Elizabeth is surprised to hear the woman speak highly of Mr. Darcy, describing him as generous, kind-hearted, and respectful to his servants and family. This glowing account sharply contrasts with Elizabeth's previous impressions of him and forces her to reevaluate her judgments. As Elizabeth reflects on Darcy's character, she is further startled when Darcy himself unexpectedly arrives at Pemberley. His demeanor is completely different from before, polite, warm, and composed. He treats the Gardiners with genuine respect, impressing Elizabeth even more with his change in behavior and social grace. Chapter 43 marks a major turning point in the novel. Elizabeth begins to see Darcy not just as a man of wealth and pride, but as someone capable of deep feeling, humility, and integrity. In Chapter 44, Elizabeth and the Gardiners continue their stay near Pemberley and are soon invited to dine there by Mr. Darcy. The change in Darcy's behavior is increasingly evident to Elizabeth. He is courteous, composed, and shows none of the pride or stiffness she once associated with him. His warmth and attention during their interactions reveal a genuine interest in her and a desire to be on good terms. During the visit, Elizabeth meets Georgiana Darcy for the first time. Georgiana is shy, gentle, and clearly devoted to her brother. Elizabeth is touched by the kindness and sensitivity Darcy shows toward his sister, which softens her feelings toward him even more. Georgiana, in turn, seems to like Elizabeth almost immediately, and the meeting goes smoothly, with mutual respect and quiet admiration forming. Mr. Bingley is also present at the gathering, and his cheerful and friendly nature helps make the atmosphere light and pleasant. Elizabeth watches with curiosity as Bingley interacts with Darcy and Georgiana, and she notes the easy affection between the siblings and friends. Chapter 44 further dismantles Elizabeth's former misconceptions about Darcy. She now sees him in a much different light, one that includes generosity, warmth, and true moral character. In Chapter 45, Elizabeth and the Gardiners make another visit to Pemberley, where they are received by Miss Darcy. Georgiana, though initially shy, becomes more comfortable around Elizabeth and clearly admires her. Elizabeth is pleased to find Georgiana not only sweet, tempered, but also modest and sincere, which further enhances Elizabeth's opinion of the Darcy family. During the visit, Caroline Bingley is also present, and her behavior reveals her continued jealousy and resentment toward Elizabeth. She attempts to insult Elizabeth through subtle remarks, particularly referencing her lower social connections. However, Mr. Darcy's calm and respectful responses to Elizabeth, and his visible irritation at Caroline's pettiness, make it clear that he values Elizabeth's presence and does not share Miss Bingley's disdain. Elizabeth handles Caroline's rudeness with grace and self-possession, earning further admiration from both Darcy and Georgiana. The contrast between Elizabeth's genuine character and Caroline's insincerity becomes more obvious. By the end of the visit, Elizabeth is more aware than ever of Darcy's steady and growing affection for her. She is struck by his attentiveness, and her own feelings have clearly begun to shift from skepticism to admiration. Chapter 45 deepens the emotional undercurrents between Elizabeth and Darcy, while highlighting key character contrasts and continuing the theme of personal growth and reassessment. In Chapter 46, Elizabeth's reflections on her experiences at Pemberley deepen as she continues to grapple with her changing feelings toward Mr. Darcy. The warmth and kindness she witnessed in his interactions with his sister Georgiana, and the genuine hospitality extended to her and the Gardiners challenge her previous judgments. Elizabeth realizes that her initial prejudice against Darcy was unfair and based on incomplete information and misunderstandings. As the chapter progresses, Elizabeth contemplates the implications of Darcy's changed behavior, especially in light of his earlier proposal, which she had rejected. She acknowledges the complexity of his character, recognizing both his pride and his capacity for generosity and humility. Elizabeth also thinks about her own flaws, including her quickness to judge and her sometimes sharp tongue. This introspection marks an important moment of personal growth for her, as she begins to understand that people are rarely simply good or bad, proud or humble, but a mixture of traits shaped by experience and circumstance. Chapter 46 serves as a turning point in Elizabeth's emotional journey, highlighting themes of self-awareness, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. It sets the stage for further developments in her evolving relationship with Darcy and the resolution of the novel's central conflicts. In Chapter 47, Elizabeth receives surprising news that Mr. Darcy has unexpectedly arrived in London. This development heightens the anticipation surrounding their relationship, especially after the recent changes in Elizabeth's perception of him during her visit to Pemberley. Elizabeth's thoughts are filled with a mix of curiosity, hope, and uncertainty about what Darcy's presence might mean. Meanwhile, Elizabeth continues her stay in London with the Gardiners, enjoying the change of scenery and the company of her aunt and uncle. However, her mind remains preoccupied with Darcy, reflecting the emotional complexity she is beginning to experience. At the same time, news from Longbourn brings concern. Lydia Bennet, Elizabeth's youngest sister, has run away with George Wickham. This scandalous event threatens the Bennet family's reputation and casts a shadow over Elizabeth's newfound optimism. The chapter shifts between Elizabeth's personal reflections and the unfolding crisis back home, emphasizing the fragile balance between social standing and personal happiness in Regency society. Chapter 47 intensifies the novel's dramatic tension by introducing a serious family predicament, while also deepening the emotional stakes in Elizabeth and Darcy's evolving story. In Chapter 48, Elizabeth is shocked and deeply distressed upon hearing the news that her youngest sister, Lydia, has eloped with George Wickham. This scandal threatens to ruin the reputation of the entire Bennet family, especially given Lydia's reckless behavior and Wickham's dubious character. Elizabeth immediately worries about the consequences for her family's social standing and the impact on her sister's prospects. The Gardiners and Elizabeth decide to return to Longbourn as quickly as possible to deal with the crisis. Elizabeth's thoughts are consumed with concern for her family and anxiety about how their neighbors and society will react to such a disgrace. Amidst this turmoil, Elizabeth reflects on the differences between Wickham's charm and Darcy's true character, realizing how dangerously deceptive Wickham has been. This contrast highlights the theme of appearances versus reality, a central idea in the novel. Chapter 48 marks a dramatic turning point, introducing a major conflict that threatens the Bennet family's future and testing Elizabeth's strength and resilience. It also sets in motion events that will profoundly affect her relationships and the course of the story. In Chapter 49, Elizabeth returns to Longbourn with the Gardiners, deeply troubled by Lydia's reckless elopement with George Wickham. The family is thrown into turmoil as Mrs. Bennet is overwhelmed with anxiety and shame, while Mr. Bennet struggles with feelings of frustration and helplessness. Elizabeth, however, remains composed and determined to support her family through the crisis. She understands the gravity of the situation and the potential damage to the family's reputation and future prospects. The chapter also introduces the Gardiners' proactive efforts to find Lydia and Wickham, showcasing their practical kindness and concern. Elizabeth's gratitude toward her aunt and uncle grows as they take charge in trying to resolve the scandal. Elizabeth's reflections during this time highlight her increasing maturity and sense of responsibility. She contrasts the selfishness of Lydia and Wickham with the steadiness and integrity of other characters, further clarifying her values. Chapter 49 intensifies the novel's tension, focusing on the consequences of impulsive actions and the importance of family loyalty and support in times of crisis. In Chapter 50, Elizabeth anxiously awaits news about Lydia and Wickham's whereabouts and well-being. The situation weighs heavily on her mind as she hopes for a resolution that will save her family from social disgrace. The gardeners, ever practical and resourceful, continue their search and efforts to locate the runaway couple. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bennet remains frantic and distressed, her worries reflecting the importance placed on reputation and marriage in their society. Elizabeth's sense of responsibility grows stronger as she takes a more active role in supporting her family through this crisis. The chapter also underscores the stark contrast between Lydia's impulsiveness and Elizabeth's growing maturity. Elizabeth contemplates the consequences of Lydia's behavior, realizing how deeply it affects not only herself but everyone around her. The tension builds as Elizabeth and her family wait for news, highlighting the novel's themes of family duty, societal pressure, and personal growth. Chapter 50 sets the stage for the crucial developments that will soon follow, as the fate of Lydia and Wickham hangs in the balance. In Chapter 51, Elizabeth receives long-awaited news. Lydia and Wickham have been found and are in London. The gardeners have located the couple and are working to resolve the situation, offering a glimmer of hope to the distressed Bennet family. Elizabeth feels a mix of relief and anxiety, knowing that while the immediate crisis is being addressed, the scandal still looms. The chapter also reveals the extent of Wickham's irresponsibility and lack of genuine commitment, deepening Elizabeth's disapproval of him. She reflects on how his charm masked his true character, contrasting sharply with Mr. Darcy's steadfastness and honor. Elizabeth's concern for her family's reputation remains paramount, but she also grows more determined to see the matter settled with dignity. The gardener's involvement proves crucial, highlighting the importance of practical support and intervention in times of trouble. Chapter 51 heightens the emotional tension while moving the plot toward resolution. It emphasizes themes of responsibility, reputation, and the consequences of reckless behavior, setting up the next steps in the Bennet family's struggle to restore their standing. In Chapter 52, Elizabeth learns that Mr. Darcy has played a significant and unexpected role in resolving the Lydia and Wickham scandal. Without seeking credit or acknowledgement, Darcy has intervened behind the scenes to ensure that Wickham honors his responsibilities by marrying Lydia, thereby preventing a complete social ruin for the Bennet family. Elizabeth is both surprised and deeply grateful for Darcy's generosity and discretion. This revelation challenges her previous assumptions about him, further softening her feelings and increasing her admiration. She recognizes that Darcy's actions demonstrate true character and kindness, contrasting sharply with Wickham's selfishness. The chapter also shows the importance of social reputation in Regency England, and how marriage could either protect or destroy a family's standing. Elizabeth reflects on how Darcy's intervention has saved her family from disgrace and begins to reconsider her own feelings toward him. Chapter 52 marks a turning point in Elizabeth and Darcy's relationship, highlighting themes of pride, prejudice, honor, and gratitude. It paves the way for the eventual reconciliation and deepening connection between the two protagonists. In Chapter 53, Elizabeth receives further confirmation of Mr. Darcy's involvement in Lydia and Wickham's marriage, learning that he not only facilitated the union, but also covered the financial arrangements without seeking any acknowledgement. This act of generosity and humility surprises Elizabeth and profoundly impacts her feelings toward him. As news of the marriage reaches Longbourn, the Bennet family experiences a mixture of relief and continued anxiety. Mrs. Bennet, while thrilled that Lydia is now married, remains primarily concerned with the social implications of the scandal and its effects on her other daughter's prospects. Elizabeth reflects on the contrast between Darcy's honorable actions and Wickham's irresponsible behavior, deepening her respect for Darcy's true character. She begins to understand the complexities behind his pride and acknowledges her own misjudgments. The chapter also highlights the themes of forgiveness and personal growth, as Elizabeth's changing perceptions mark a significant step in her emotional journey. Darcy's selfless intervention paves the way for the gradual healing of misunderstandings between them, setting the stage for the novel's resolution. In Chapter 54, Elizabeth returns to Longbourn after the crisis with Lydia has been somewhat resolved. She finds that her family is slowly recovering from the shock and embarrassment caused by the scandal, though the event has left a lasting impact on everyone, especially Mrs. Bennet, who remains preoccupied with her daughter's futures. Elizabeth's thoughts continue to revolve around Mr. Darcy and his unexpected kindness. She reflects on how much she has misunderstood him and feels a growing sense of gratitude and affection. Her changing feelings are accompanied by a greater awareness of her own pride and prejudice, leading to deeper self-reflection. At Longbourn, news arrives that Mr. Bingley has returned to Netherfield, sparking renewed excitement and hope, especially for Jane Bennet, whose relationship with Bingley had been previously interrupted. This development suggests a turning point not only for Jane but also for the wider network of relationships among the characters. Chapter 54 emphasizes themes of reconciliation, personal growth, and the renewed possibilities that arise after trials and misunderstandings, moving the story steadily toward its happy resolution. In Chapter 55, news spreads that Mr. Bingley has returned to Netherfield, rekindling hope for a renewed romance between him and Jane Bennet. The prospect excites the Bennet family, especially Mrs. Bennet, who eagerly anticipates the match that had seemed lost. Jane herself remains composed yet quietly hopeful. Elizabeth notices the changes in the social atmosphere as Bingley's return stirs interest and speculation among the local community. This event signals a shift toward reconciliation and the possibility of happy endings for several characters. Meanwhile, Elizabeth continues to reflect on her evolving feelings toward Mr. Darcy. Her growing admiration and gratitude for his recent actions contrast sharply with her earlier prejudices, marking a significant transformation in her character and perspective. The chapter balances the renewed social optimism with Elizabeth's internal journey, emphasizing themes of forgiveness, change, and the complexities of human relationships. It sets the stage for upcoming interactions that will further develop the central relationships of the novel. Chapter 55 moves the narrative closer to its conclusion by weaving together personal growth and social reconciliation, preparing readers for the final resolutions. In Chapter 56, Elizabeth receives an unexpected visit from Mr. Darcy at Longbourn. His arrival surprises the Bennet family, but especially Elizabeth, who is both curious and cautious about his intentions. Darcy's demeanor is humble and sincere, a marked contrast to the prideful attitude she had once attributed to him. During his visit, Darcy and Elizabeth engage in candid conversation, where he openly expresses his feelings and explains his actions, particularly regarding Lydia and Wickham. His sincerity and vulnerability impress Elizabeth, deepening her respect and affection for him. The Bennet family observes the growing warmth between Elizabeth and Darcy, though some remain skeptical of Darcy's intentions. Nevertheless, his visit marks a significant step in bridging the social and emotional gaps between them. Chapter 56 highlights themes of reconciliation, honesty, and the breaking down of social barriers. Darcy's visit signals the beginning of a new chapter in his and Elizabeth's relationship, moving the story toward its emotional climax and eventual resolution. In Chapter 57, Mr. Darcy makes a formal and heartfelt proposal to Elizabeth at Longbourn, surprising both her and her family. This time, his approach is sincere, humble, and full of genuine emotion, a stark contrast to his earlier, more awkward proposal. Darcy openly expresses his deep love and admiration for Elizabeth, acknowledging how she has changed his perceptions and softened his pride. Elizabeth, now fully aware of Darcy's true character and moved by his actions, accepts his proposal with warmth and happiness. Their mutual understanding and respect mark a significant turning point in the novel, as both characters have grown and overcome their initial misunderstandings and prejudices. The Bennet family reacts with a mixture of surprise and joy, though Mrs. Bennet is primarily excited about the advantageous match. Elizabeth's acceptance of Darcy's proposal symbolizes the resolution of major themes such as pride, prejudice, and social expectations. Chapter 57 is the emotional climax of Pride and Prejudice celebrating the triumph of love, personal growth, and the overcoming of societal barriers. Chapter 58, the immediate aftermath of Darcy and Elizabeth's engagement, sees the Bennet family adjusting to the exciting news. Elizabeth writes to Jane, sharing the happy tidings and expressing her gratitude and joy. Jane, ever the gentle and supportive sister, responds with heartfelt congratulations, reflecting the strong familial bonds that have been a cornerstone of the story. Elizabeth's letter also touches on Mr. Darcy's changed demeanor and character, emphasizing how he has grown more humble, kind, and considerate, qualities that have won her love and admiration. This communication highlights the personal growth Elizabeth herself has undergone, moving beyond initial prejudice to see the complexity and goodness in Darcy. Meanwhile, the social circle around the Bennets begins to react. While some, like Mrs. Bennet, are thrilled at the prospect of such a favorable match, others, especially those who held reservations about Darcy's pride or Elizabeth's lower social standing, respond with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. Nevertheless, the engagement is a clear signal that social boundaries, while still present, can be bridged by mutual respect and affection. During this period, Austen subtly explores the contrast between genuine affection and societal expectations. Mrs. Bennet's exuberance about the match is often tinged with concern for social status and financial security, while Elizabeth and Darcy's relationship is founded on mutual understanding and personal growth. This dichotomy underscores one of the novel's central themes: the difference between marrying for convenience or advantage and marrying for love and respect. The chapter also revisits some of the secondary characters, particularly Lydia and Wickham, whose reckless elopement had threatened the Bennet family's reputation earlier in the novel. Their situation remains unresolved in this chapter, but looms as a cautionary backdrop to Elizabeth and Darcy's more mature and responsible relationship. Chapter 59. In Chapter 59, attention turns to Mr. Bingley and Jane Bennet, whose romance, interrupted earlier in the story, begins to rekindle with renewed vigor. Encouraged by Darcy's influence and his own affection for Jane, Bingley returns to Netherfield with the intention of proposing. This chapter is filled with warmth and hope, contrasting with the social anxieties that permeated earlier sections. Jane's calm and composed nature, paired with Bingley's amiability, presents a more traditional yet equally sincere example of love and partnership. Their reunion is marked by gentle affection and mutual respect, reflecting the novel's broader message about the variety of ways love can manifest. Bingley's proposal and Jane's acceptance serve as a narrative parallel to Elizabeth and Darcy's relationship, highlighting differing social positions and temperaments but similar foundations of genuine affection. This parallelism enriches the novel's exploration of marriage, showing that happiness can be found in diverse circumstances. Moreover, the chapter briefly revisits Charlotte Lucas and Mr. Collins. While their marriage had initially been portrayed as pragmatic and somewhat lacking in passion, Austen gives subtle hints of Charlotte's contentment and practical wisdom, suggesting that happiness in marriage can also be built on respect and companionship rather than just romantic love. Throughout Chapter 59, Austen continues to examine themes of social mobility and the influence of wealth and status. While Darcy's fortune and Bingley's inheritance provide financial security, the emphasis remains on personal virtues like kindness, understanding, and integrity as the true basis for lasting relationships. Chapter 60 deals with the formal announcements and preparations for the upcoming marriages. The news of Darcy and Elizabeth's engagement spreads quickly through their respective social circles, eliciting a range of reactions. Elizabeth returns to her childhood home at Longbourn, where the Bennet family, despite some lingering worries, welcomes the engagement with genuine happiness, Jane Austen's characteristic wit shines through in Mrs. Bennet's exaggerated joy and hopes for her daughter's futures, which provides a light-hearted contrast to the novel's more serious moments. At this stage, Austen also deepens the portrayal of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who reacts with indignation and fury to the news of Darcy's engagement to Elizabeth. Lady Catherine had previously attempted to prevent their union, seeing Elizabeth as socially inferior and unworthy of Darcy's rank and wealth. Her vehement opposition highlights the rigid class distinctions and social hierarchies that the novel critiques throughout. Lady Catherine's confrontation with Elizabeth, which occurs earlier, but whose implications resonate here, symbolizes the tension between societal expectations and individual choice. Elizabeth's refusal to be intimidated by Lady Catherine demonstrates her strength of character and commitment to personal happiness over social convention. This resistance also marks Elizabeth's full development from a young woman constrained by prejudice and social pressures into a confident individual who values integrity and love above status. Meanwhile, the chapter continues to portray the evolving dynamics between Darcy and Elizabeth. Their growing closeness and mutual respect become evident to those around them, and their relationship begins to symbolize a new possibility for bridging social divides. Darcy's efforts to integrate Elizabeth into his world, and her willingness to engage with it on her own terms, embody the novel's hopeful vision of social harmony through personal growth and understanding. Chapter 61, the final chapter of Pride and Prejudice, brings a satisfying resolution to the story's major plot lines and characters. Elizabeth and Darcy are married in a ceremony that reflects both their personal happiness and the social reconciliation that their union represents. Their marriage is portrayed as a true partnership based on love, respect, and equality, qualities that distinguish them from many other couples in the novel. Austen emphasizes the joy and contentment that come from marrying not for wealth or status but for mutual understanding and affection. Following their wedding, Elizabeth and Darcy settle at Pemberley, where Elizabeth finds herself accepted into Darcy's world, but without losing her own identity and independence. Their home becomes a symbol of the novel's themes of balance and harmony between social classes and personal values. The chapter also reveals that Jane and Bingley marry soon after, further solidifying the novel's optimistic conclusion. Their union, too, reflects the triumph of love and kindness over obstacles and misunderstandings. Secondary characters receive brief updates, providing closure on their arcs. Charlotte Lucas continues her practical marriage with Mr. Collins, appearing content and settled. Lydia and Wickham, while still married, are portrayed as reckless and irresponsible, serving as a cautionary contrast to the more mature couples. Austen closes the novel with reflections on the happiness and prosperity that come from characters who have learned from their mistakes, grown emotionally, and embraced the values of honesty, humility, and love. Themes and reflections in the final chapters, the concluding chapters of Pride and Prejudice, encapsulate many of the novel's central themes: personal growth and self-awareness. Both Elizabeth and Darcy undergo significant transformations. Darcy's pride is tempered by humility, and Elizabeth's prejudice softens into understanding. Their union symbolizes the triumph of growth and maturity. Social class and marriage. Austen critiques the rigid class distinctions of her time, but offers a hopeful vision that true character and virtue can transcend social barriers. Marriage is based on respect and affection, rather than convenience or social ambition, lead to genuine happiness. Family and reputation. The novel acknowledges the importance of family reputation, but also emphasizes forgiveness and support. The Bennet family's trials, especially Lydia's scandal, test but ultimately strengthen family bonds. Love and partnership. The marriages of Elizabeth and Darcy, as well as Jane and Bingley, highlight the value of partnership founded on mutual respect and emotional compatibility, contrasting with more pragmatic or superficial unions elsewhere in the novel. Humor and social critique. Austen's sharp wit and social commentary continue to shine, particularly through characters like Mrs. Bennet and Lady Catherine, whose exaggerated behaviors underscore the absurdities of societal expectations.